Welcome to Ride the Wave, hosted by me, Jeff Fisher, and co-hosted by Mark Robinson, in partnership with the Ride the Wave Foundation. Visit us at ridethewave.org, where we're dedicated to empowering their lives through free resources in servant leadership, mental health wellness, and how to find a purpose. At Ride the Wave, we believe in the power of every story, talent, and voice. Our commitment is clear: to bridge divides, unite communities, and build an all-inclusive, modern campus for those experiencing homelessness. So let's dive in and ride the wave of positive change together. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jeff Fisher, and with me to my right, Mark Robinson.
Jeff?
What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Good, you?
Excellent. Today's guests are Christina Cruz, who's a professor of dance at Fairleigh Dickinson University, producer at Foxy Awards, an acting, vocal, dance, and a musical theater performer. She's a coach. And also Blaise Lavario is with us today. Thank you for being here, Blaise.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Christina and Blaise, they're starring in a theater production right now called Jesus Christ Superstar. And Blaise is also a therapist. He's going to be a future sex therapist and inclusion and intimacy director within theater. So today's topic, we're going to discuss gender in theater, essentially. And just so everybody knows that we've created a space here where there's understanding. This isn't to promote, it's not to dismiss or discourage anybody's lifestyle, nothing like that. This is purely for understanding. So we could sit here, because I think it's important. I know right now, Mark, come on. There's got to be some people that just don't have an understanding of what it is. Certain aspects of gender. So we're here to really lift under the hood and just see exactly what it is calmly in a nice, relaxing space. So, Blaise, Christina, you guys are the best for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. We know each
Glad
other.
to have you. Glad to have you.
Yes,
We
yes.
do. Yeah, so Sky Lamas, the studio too. You guys got to check out Sky Lamas Studios. If you have a podcast or you're looking to have one and you want quality, Sky Llama Studios, they're in Totowa, New Jersey. Check them out. But Christina and I met because Mark and I were doing acting classes. There's also Sky Llama's Acting Academy. Check that out. It's a great, Christina, I got to say, you're very talented. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We learned a lot, and it's really good for not just acting people. If there's anybody that needs confidence boost or anything like that, or you want to public speak, just check out their website and go from there. All right. So Christina, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me here. Honored to be on the show. The reason why you started taking the acting classes with Sky Llamas was to build your confidence for the podcast. And I'm happy to have been a little part of that and to work with you and Mark every week. And so this kind of come full circle that I could be a guest in your space now.
Well, you're very good at it. You have a way of bringing out something in someone to get there. Like there was the situation with my cousin Maya that one time.
Oh yes, we were working on emotional substitution.
Yeah, and you placed her in my mind about something that I was acting out, and that it made me sincere. I felt I transformed a little bit. So it's pretty cool. It's interesting, the energy and stuff like that. And I'm very interested in learning more of gender really within theater too, because
and that was a topic that came up during the acting class, which kind of brought us to this situation. Was it a scene that you were improving where
I think so. You wrote some stuff on the board because you've taught it before.
Yes.
That's what it was.
It was part of my master's thesis at Montclair State University when I was getting my MA in theater studies, that I explored gender representation in theater, and then flash forward 12 years later, teaching the Acting Academy comes up again topic, and I'm an ally to the LGBTQ alphabet community, as Blaise likes to say, and got the phone call from you to do the podcast, and then Blaise and I were in rehearsal for Jesus Christ Superstar, and then we started talking about Cabaret, the musical, which led us into different gender dynamics that are, evident in theater and with casting and everything like that. And then when you asked me to be on here, I was like, okay, I need to bring someone with me who has this lived experience, and the perfect person to do this would be Blaise. So,
Blaise, and how do you both identify?
I am a non-binary person. My pronouns are they and them. So I would say I identify as a trans non-binary person.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I identify as cis woman. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm also heterosexual, which will lead us into the conversation of how those identifiers don't depend on one another. And that was kind of where the educational talk went that night when we were doing Acting Academy. So
yeah, because Mark, unless you know something, one thing I'm definitely not going to do is sit here and pretend like I know. And yeah, I would say, like I said before, that there's a lot of people that I know that just wouldn't have that understanding. So if you could, Blaise, maybe start. Just tell us a little bit about what you do and some of the things, and maybe keep that in mind. What would people need to know or hear, or how is it?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I know it's gender in theater is a very broad topic, but it's something that has been a part of what theater is since performing's inception. Like a fun little anecdote for you listeners, the word drag, one of the commonly accepted origins of that term for drag queen, is that Shakespeare in the Old Globe, he would write his scripts, and at the time women weren't allowed to actually perform on stage with men, and so men would have to play all the parts, including the females' parts. So what he would do is he would say, actor A enters, actor B enters, DRAG, dressed as a girl, and so the term DRAG is drag, and so now we have drag queen because of things like that. So gender in theater has been something that's been a conversation for a while, and the explorations of what being a man means, what being a woman means, and what being kind of in between or without those two identities kind of mean. And we've been around for really since civilization. People have been exploring what it means to be these things for a while. And I think what ends up happening, especially in very volatile environments, is that people start to think that a certain box needs to stay that box, and anything that starts to deviate out of it is brand new. And it's really not. It's just a question of visibility. It's just a question of comfortability. People get very used to kind of living within their own circles, their own communities, their own neighborhoods, and they feel safe within those things. So the minute that something happens that shifts or changes, that can be really terrifying. That can be really scary because we don't like things to change. As good as people can be with change and as good as you can learn how to deal with it, new things that kind of shake your foundations a little bit can really cause you to start asking a lot of questions and maybe not behaving like the best person you want to be.
How important is it as a community? Is that a big aspect to you for it, to have people that are together that you could relate to, that are there? That I'm sure is a big aspect of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think for anything else, part of, I think, one of the big things, just, for the queer community in general as well, is that a lot of different identities were always kind of, to parlance, a different kind of phrase, hidden under a bushel, as it were. And you kind of existed in the shadows and in secret just because of the nature of what your attractions were or the nature of what made you feel the most like yourself. And this didn't just happen because of people being gender expansive or queer or anything else like that. This also happened for people, let's say there was a cis male who was very comfortable being a hairdresser.
Okay, for anybody that doesn't know, can you please tell the audience what cis is?
Oh yeah, let's have another fun little education moment, shall we?
Breakdown of like we're doing that. If you don't mind, we'll switch gears just a little.
Let's do it. So just first and foremost, cis means same. I mean, essentially, if someone's cis, it means that the sex they were assigned at birth, your genitals that you were born with, you identify that as well, and that's your expression. So if you are male, you were assigned male at birth, and you identify as a male on. Most folks you're going to meet are going to be cis men or cis women. That's just where people are at right now. It literally just means same. A lot of folks think that cis is like a bad thing. it's just a word, I promise. It just means, oh, this is what I am. And then someone who is trans is somebody who is, transcended that kind of definition for themselves. It means they're stepping outside of it. And then you have the other added addition of like trans man, trans woman, or just trans in general, meaning I exist outside of that binary of cis male and cis female.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Remember, Christina, when you were on the board?
Yes.
Could you break that?
So
or
on
could you guys
the
break
board,
that down?
I think we could definitely break that down together.
Of course.
How your definition cis trans, right, is independent of how you represent yourself, your gender, in society, versus your sexuality. So we had those three different talking points and how one doesn't necessarily influence the other, or you can have any combination of the three. And I think that's where things had gotten really interesting in the acting class.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, the other part of it that's going to be mind blown is that all of that makes sense until it doesn't, and until somebody finds another identity that makes them feel empowered, right? Like, the entire point of it is this idea of fluidity and identity as a fluid being in and of itself. We are never just one static thing throughout our lives, regardless of how we identify. We are always taking in new information. We are always evolving. We are always transcending to that next point of our lives. And usually when most suffering for ourselves happens is when we stop that process, either through our will or through circumstance where we can't grow anymore.
I talk a decent amount about certain servant leadership and positive, leadership, but also that kind of stuff, personal development. So I completely hear what you're saying there.
Absolutely. And so like, it's one of those things where, and especially now because of like feminist theory and queer theory, and we'll go into queer theory a little bit later. That's a whole other topic. But essentially, like it's this idea of where do we fit, right? And where do our attractions fit? And it's very easy to say I'm a cis man, I'm attracted to other cis men, and so therefore I am gay. That's what that is. Cis female to cis female, I'm a lesbian. But what starts to happen is when people start to expand beyond those identities for themselves. Do you still consider yourself a lesbian? Do you still consider yourself gay? If a cis male dates a trans woman, are they still straight? And of course, a lot of us would say, you are whatever you want to say you are. That's perfectly fine. If you are straight, then you're straight. If you're gay, then you're gay, and this is what you are. I'm going to respect that identity. But it creates an internalized conflict because, again, even non-binary and trans folks have our own conflicts as well with our sexualities because we have all grown up in this culture that says these are where the boxes fit. And when we start to try to expand beyond those boxes, it creates dissonance within our experience. How do you reconcile that dissonance with your sexuality and with your gender? That's why I love that conversation because it's like what does it mean to be attracted to somebody else? But then the next part of that question for me is, why do we keep having these conversations and are so intensely interested in what we're interested in? Why can't we just love a person for who they are? Why do we need these labels in the first place? And I think that's a big question and a basis of queer theory and just the basis of the word queer in and of itself is gender and sexuality are not linked, yet they kind of are linked, and yet all we really want to be able to do is embrace who we love and who we're sexually attracted to without needing so much definition that it limits us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I always talk about how I identify as a cis woman and I'm femme presenting, right? I have my nails done. I spent a lot of time doing my hair for this podcast. Great. Thank you so much, right? And I tend to skew on that end of the spectrum, but I have all these qualities about myself. I'm, a powerful leader. I'm driven. I'm determined. I'm not subtle. I will speak my mind. The situation comes back to me when I was in high school and, I was at the top of my class and, I was never afraid to raise my hand and say my opinion. And, I was good at math. I was good at English. I was, a stellar student. I got voted, teacher's pet. But I look the way that I do, and a lot of people.
Christina's not a nerd.
I am. I'm so
I can't believe Mark said that just
Listen,
now.
nerds are in right now. Nerds are in.
Nerds are in. But I remember that this guy in my class, he was like, Christina, you're so attractive, but I just don't understand, and I don't understand your personality. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it just doesn't match the way you look. And I was like, interesting. And that's what really led me to go into feminist studies and to see this and see why there was such a divide that, you know, men had to absolutely dismiss everything masculine in order to be like the alpha male. And then to be considered an alpha female, you know, you're called derogatory terms. Like if you call someone out on something, or if you say like no, and you're direct and you're curt, and, you know, like it's kind of like the song by Taylor Swift, The Man, you know, like if I were a man, like how different would my life have been? You know, and not that I ever wake up and I'm like, oh, I should have been a man, you know, but I think there's definitely been parts of me, like, especially in an academic setting or a setting that was competitive, or even different work environments that I've been in, that I'm just like, wow, like I would have been taken differently if I was, you know, a different sex.
Do you think that anybody ever fakes or have you met anyone that maybe, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but like may act it out in an effort to fit in with a particular community? And the reason I asked that, like when I was bused to another school in elementary, and then I came back in 8th grade, and I really was a product, friends-wise, of who came up and approached me. So the people that, you know, you had that connection, I had that connection with, were the ones that ended up being my friend. And, you know, if they ended up being skater kids, maybe I would have gotten a skateboard or something like that. Do you think that it could be potentially possible that somebody may want to feel like they fit in with a group because normally they wouldn't, and they can do something like that?
In regards to?
Just like not really being them, but then putting on a false persona to fit into a group, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that, psychologically speaking, we are growing up, especially, we are products of who we spend time with. And especially if who we spend time with, you know, gives us that positive affirmation. Like if you with a group of people, they laugh at your jokes, they include you into that group, that's very often we're like, this is where I want to be. I know that for queer kids and trans kids, there's this thing called, I mean, it's usually in terms of like, you know, people who code switch at work, and it's usually something to do with like folks of color going to work and having to like sound more white or sound more professional, whatever that means. But like,
you do certain things to fit in, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's natural, right, Mark? I mean, don't you think that's something that is natural, and especially as a young person? And that, so that, I was just curious about that, because I think that is something that I never really heard brought up, but it does make sense that on occasion.
Yeah, I think that
happen.
You know, being involved with different circles, I mean, I think segueing back to theater, because theater really allows you to come as you are, because you're going to put that mask on to portray somebody else on stage or on film in order to represent the story that the playwright or the composer, the lyricist has given you. And so I think that theater people understand this idea of masking and putting on and taking off, and how versatile that can be, and how, you know, we do it for every single situation. If you've ever waited tables, like you have a mask of customer service on, or at least you should. And if you don't, you know, either your table can be like, wow, that person is having a human moment and isn't, you know, in their mask, and maybe nice. I can give them compassion, or like, F you, you're the worst waiter I've ever had, and like, how dare you be something else than what I was expecting you to be at that point in time.
We are something to everybody. You know, for me, I'm a son to my mom, to somebody else, I'm a friend. And
and I think in all different facets, you do adjust your behavior accordingly. But I think that in different communities, because, you know, I have different experience. Even this morning at FDU, my college students are very inclusive and very hyper aware, and the way that I speak with them is a little bit different than I would be talking with somebody of a different age group, of a different generation, just for a relatability standpoint. But it shouldn't be, I think, that far removed from yourself. I think that's kind of, we're trying to bridge the gap of being more inclusive, so that, you know, I can show up as myself wherever I go, and I don't have to mask. But like, even as a woman, like there's a certain way that, you're supposed to behave around men of, or non-binary people. Like when women are just together, it's a little bit different, sometimes it shouldn't have to be, but I've definitely had to put on the veil or the mask, when I've been different places, and maybe be a little bit more apologetic, or make myself a little bit smaller depending on who I was around,
Okay.
I think we were having an interesting thought in the car about what were we saying? We were saying that it wasn't the problem about coming out as gay, but maybe as feminine.
Right.
Yes,
Yep.
that's where it starts to get to people.
Yeah, like it's this idea that when you were growing up, if you were like a cis man or boy, right, and you liked other boys or anything like that, it wasn't the act of liking other boys that was the problem. It was the fact that it made you a sissy. It was the fact that it was something that you were doing what girls were doing. You were acting more feminine, and that was the thing that ended up getting you bullied and being policed. It had nothing to do with you liking other boys, because if you really want like a lot of shocking numbers, the amount of young heterosexual men that sexually explored with one another as kids is astounding. Like, sexual exploration is so natural between kids, between teenagers, regardless of their gender. But because of like socialization, things never really get spoken about, and then those things that aren't spoken about become issues later on, because they're hearing, oh, these are bad things that occurred to you. These are bad things that never should have happened, even if they're naturally developing things that just occur because children are curious, teenagers are curious. And it's so hard when you realize that it's not really about who you have sex with. It's about this strange binary that was created saying, if a man acts like a woman, all of a sudden that means that they're less than, and we have to put them back in their place again.
Right. I take the road of, you yourself, you live your life, and it really is so cliche, but character.
Yeah.
As long as you're not a jerk or something. As long as you're
Truly.
not putting people down. And Blaise, you're really nice. And right off the bat, I slipped a couple times, but you were cool with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not and only the reason why is because it's just I'm not used to. And I think it's also important on the other end for someone like yourself to realize that too, that we are all in this together, and there are huge gaps in understanding. You know what I mean? I recently came back Thursday. I was at the Day of Development. Also, thank you so much to Amy, Julie, Angela, and John Gordon for the support. I really, really appreciate it. John, it was really amazing to get an opportunity to speak to you. This thing's going, and I'm not going to stop. And, while I was there, the topic was energy vampires within a company culture. So you're developing a culture, trying to bring it out, right? Like, you could have people that might bring it down, like whatever, how to manage them. One of the things that I said was understanding, which I think that people miss that. Maybe something's going on in that person's lives. Like, what they're different than me if I'm a leader, or is that really a bad thing though? Maybe they're filling in a gap somewhere for me. So I think that it's important. It's really important to have spaces like this, or to have conversations like this, so we can get an understanding of each other. So I really appreciate you being cool about it.
Absolutely. And one thing that I really want to mention, and I think this is part of the reason why this comes up a lot for folks, especially cis folks meeting trans folks and like having them more enmeshed in their lives, as it were, is that everyone is accustomed to this idea that you're going to slip up a few times when you meet somebody with a new identity. It's natural. It's when that few times becomes a dozen times, becomes 24 times, and becomes over the course of weeks and months and years. Because the other side of it is that if you're only practicing respecting who I am in front of me, but then the minute you leave the room and you're just not even thinking about it, that's not actually respect. That's just trying to keep things comfortable and copacetic. And that's where I think a lot of trans folks start to feel very defensive, is that if they're around people who consistently do this, and they've given them grace, they've given them patience, they've said, this is fine, it's going to take some adjusting, and then months or years pass, and you can tell that this person is not really doing the work, is something that I think it's very, very difficult for them a lot of the times. And it's one of the reasons why it's hard walking through the world and being as patient. And it requires a degree of emotional resilience, because I would just have anyone imagine, if you would, walking outside of your door, if like someone was walking up to you any day of the week and they kept calling you a woman, or they kept calling you by the wrong name even. And and it's like, oh, it's fine. You just met me. You'll get my name right. But over the course of 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and they kept getting the wrong name, do you internalize that being like, I'm just going to let it go? But then that one person becomes 2, becomes 5, becomes 10, and all of a sudden you got a dynamic.
The only thing that on the flip side of that, knowing my family, like people that I surround myself, they're really, really good people, and it is that kind of lack of understanding there. Is as long as there's an understanding on the other end, where that's how people were raised, and getting mad or angry, any kind of clapback there, I think that, it goes both ways. Christina, you were just recently saying we have to fit certain boxes and molds when we're talking to certain people. Like you would tone it down knowing the audience or things like that. But I think giving grace to the fact that somebody's not really doing it intentional. It's just that we've grown up with, we're used to. I've never, and it's fairly new, all things considering, when you think about it. The way it's gone within the last 5 years? Do you think that?
I mean, I think
10 years.
Blaise started the talk at saying
I mean
that. I think maybe visibility wise for some people.
Visibility wise, or out there as far as it has been mainstream.
It's been
what I meant by that.
Right. It's definitely been more visible, and for a lot of reasons. I mean, you can look at Snapchat, TikTok, the ways that teenagers now are just engaging with one another. Like the world is intensely connected,
It's
and that's
so
not
different.
Yeah, and it's not
totally different. It's bizarre, isn't it?
And it's not going anywhere anytime
new dimension.
soon.
We went into Mark. We travel in a new dimension. The world is so weird now. It's almost like an unveiling process. Everything's coming to light. Hollywood, it's wild. But
yeah, and I think for the most part, as long as somebody, a trans person or non-binary person, it has people that love and respect them, and they know that they're trying. The other side of this, and this is just where it gets complicated, is just that this is not somebody deciding to wear like a red shirt later, or what's another like generational thing that occurred? Like rock music, right? Like let's say like the transition into like hard rock, classic rock, from like Elvis type of rock to like classic rock. For a while there, that was called the devil's music by a lot of people, and it was just so different. And it was hard to say these are the things that I enjoyed,
stuff like
100%.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how do you get used to this over the course of time? And some people never did. Some people were like, I still hate that music. I'm never going to listen to it again. But on the other side of that, you didn't have rates of suicide increasing dramatically for teenagers. You didn't have rates of murder for Black trans women going up because of that lack of respect. And I think that's where that defensiveness comes from. It's not a question of them not wanting to step up and like be present for people. It's that the reality is that on the other side of those identities not being respected is a mortal question that often happens, which is why it's sometimes hard, I think, for non-binary and trans folks to step up to the plate and being like, I want to give you understanding, because maybe that understanding at one point gets to a point where they just can't handle it anymore, because it's not just this one person. It's, again, 5 people, it's 10 people, and or a community of folks, of their friends, some of whom might not make it throughout the year because of that respect and or lack of it. And so I think,
I got you.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. And I think, but for the most part, I do completely agree that this is a transition in time as well.
Yeah.
I fully do believe that, trans and non-binary and gender expansive folks, they've been around forever, throughout, like, since Sumeria, essentially. Like, they've existed forever. But because of just the way that socialization works and society works, different things come into focus and are on the top of like essentially the social food chain over other things, and things start to go and like hide over here, hide over there. Everything shifts and ebbs and flows, and as we transition, there definitely needs to be patience for both trans folks and for cis folks as we kind of come together to try and create something that's full of respect.
It's almost like when something happens, that's when the issue becomes like a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Something happens with, this person that happens to be in the community of them, they, or having, he,
in the queer community.
he, she, her. It's like only when an issue happens within the social industry, like in a movie or in something.
And usually
That-
it's a tragic issue that
Right.
propels progress forward. And
Yeah.
I think that, us as a community needs to work to be more preventative, with it. And I think that's what the, feminist movement, kind of started because you had women
yeah.
this is it. This is all I get to do with my life is just like sit at home and watch these children that I didn't even want. But like I had no other choice because I can't own a home. I can't have credit. I can't drive.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't do anything without my husband. So let me just walk into the ocean and like end it all, like it's the stereotypical, And so that's like when women started to ask more questions, it was to change their social status, that it's like, hey, like I want to be able to provide for myself. I want to be able to go out and do these things on my own. Like, why can't I own property? Why can't I have a credit card? Why can't I drive a car? Why can't I be on stage? Why can't I do these things just because of how I was born? And it just goes into power dynamics,
I think that approach, how you go about it, does make a difference. One of the things, Kristen's mom, for example, Lily, Kristen's my wife.
Oh, hi, Kristen.
Yeah, shout out, Kristen. Love you. Yeah, and her mom, Lily, shout out. She's great. Both amazing cooks.
Yes.
Yeah, and she once said to me, so she worked for Dior, and early on when it wasn't quite kosher, she was a female, almost a CEO, but ended up staying or not doing it for family.
Yeah.
And one of the things she said is the network you have going up is going to be the one going down. Us sitting here having a humane conversation about it, I think is a better approach than getting upset. Like if you honestly, like I met you for the first time, you were really mean to me about that or
Right.
something like that. It's like you're then dismissing my upbringing, vice versa. You know what I mean? So instead of that, I think we need to connect. One of the things Wavemaker book, one of the reasons why that was published was really just for that. It's a repurposed story of Daryl. I had a encounter with a man in a van. He was homeless. And it's followed by principles how to approach people in the street that we normally wouldn't. So things like that. And I'll tell you what, it does not matter. Mark, right? Remember that one lady that cried in Starbucks? And any gender, any race, age, or anything like that. And we're like, oh, there's for sure something to this. Because I think in all of us is a spirit. And it's a spirit. And that's what Wave is. And I think that the path is to the person and really pursuing that, knowing that we all really have that component. And that's the most important thing to connect to. And everything else is just semantics, really.
And I think
100%.
The most important thing to remember too is that everybody is living their own human experience, right? Like as much as we try and like put things into like this happened to me, blah blah blah, but everybody's had a time in their life where they've been misunderstood. Just like Blaise said, like if people call me Chris or Christine, I'm like, no, like my name is Christina. Like it's not Chrissy. It's not any of those things. And sometimes I'll accept a nickname, if I know that it's been given to me out of love and light. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like I have like a friend who always called me Steener, because like the little kids, when I teach them dance, they're like, Miss Stina, like Miss Christina turns into Miss Stina, and she's like, Steeners, you know what I mean? But that wasn't given to me from people who didn't know me, It wasn't shouted at me on the street. It wasn't done under assumptions, and it's just
Assumptions.
Right.
The key word right there. And if we can, to get into the actual way, it's the structure.
Oh, yeah.
What we had gone over. So there's what you're born as.
Yep.
Gender?
Yes.
Okay. Could
So
you
that's like your
explain, please?
chromosomal makeup.
Oh yeah. So yeah,
Sure.
so we have biological sex is essentially, were you born, what genitalia were you born with, and that they'll put that assigned as, and typically, and the gender queer and gender expansive thing we say that's
So
that's
what
their
is
sex
queer?
assigned at birth.
For anybody that doesn't know, what does that mean?
So essentially nowadays, and this is queer at first was just the word that meant strange or different, and then it evolved to mean something bad. It was like you're a queer, you're bad, and then like a lot of bad words, it was like taken back by the LGBTQ plus community to mean this is our umbrella to describe ourselves. Maybe I don't feel fully gay, fully lesbian, fully this. You know what? I know that I'm not straight.
Okay.
And so I say
Thanks for
I'm
clarifying.
queer. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like an umbrella term that catches most of a differing kind of sexuality.
Okay.
And now I have no idea what I was about to say before that.
We went
Biological
from
sex.
Oh, yeah, so
and
yeah.
then talk
So-
about gender representation.
So yeah, so we'll say things like assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth, and we'll usually shorten that to mean like AMAB, AFAB, AFAB, things like that. And then we have our gender identity, which is how we feel we identify. I feel non-binary. I don't feel like a man or a woman. Then we also have something called gender expression.
is there any, I know the human language is so limited,
Yep.
especially when it comes to like internal stuff and just like experiences. Like how are you going to explaining like, I think it was on Rogan or something like that. Like a hallucinogenic experience is like explaining a kaleidoscope to a blind person or something like that. Or like certain experiences are so tough. And that the feeling of the non-binary, like what does it feel like there? Does that mean that there's no attraction to sex, or is that, I mean, obviously there is, but like, does that mean both? Or like, yeah, I guess like inside, is there any way, do you think like you could describe the feeling inside?
Well, first and foremost,
in your insides?
yeah. Let me say this directly to the camera. Trans people aren't a monolith. Everything I'm saying right now is very much just kind of my own personal experience. You could bring another trans person in here and have a completely different conversation surrounding this.
You
but it's
personally.
important to
Right.
like to know that. But for me, like to answer that question effectively, I kind of would have to go back to, for me, what it was like as a kid growing up. And I come from a family of 9. I had 3 older brothers, all of whom were varying degrees of masculine, but I was very much not that. But one thing I did understand and did know that the more feminine I was, the harder it was going to be. Like the not just picking on, but like the abuse, the physical abuse that was going to occur outside of my house. And it definitely did. And I knew that at the time that I was attracted to other boys. I was very young. I was like 7. I already knew at that point that I was different. And
So just as if I would look at a female, Christina, anything, that impulse inside, the way you feel as far as attraction, not for women whatsoever,
not
just, but
nope.
noticing, all right, like I'm kind of seeing this boy or this and having feelings there. So that is what came
That was
naturally.
like that was the sexuality thing that I discovered. And when I after I came out at 15 and I started like going on dates with people, there were still gender roles within a same-sex relationship. There were still people being like, who's the top, who's the bottom, or who wears the pants in the relationship is a very popular one that gets very annoying to answer.
Usually, but isn't it funny how naturally sometimes that does take place, though? There usually is a dominant, or like it's very rare you see like somebody with the same personalities. Like for me, for example, like Kristen is definitely more laid back. I'm out there, more heart in my sleeve. So there are those. I don't know. I feel a certain way about like, if this is how I feel or this is how I am, the pointing of the fingers is not really something that I like. Oh, well, your thing is not cool, but mine is. This is what we're going to do.
Yep.
That's where it loses me.
Right. No, I think a big part of it is a question of agency.
Okay.
Because it's an assumption, once again, that if you look at somebody, 2 men, 2 women, and you take your experiences and you paint them with it, instead of asking a question, it's like, so what's your relationship like? The immediate understanding is that there is a dominant and a submissive. You use a knowledge of something that works for you, that you learned, and you assume it works for them. And it becomes this thing where you kind of don't get to use your own language to describe yourself without it becoming a long dialogue. And I think that's the thing for queer folks in particular, is that we don't necessarily have the same kind of rules as heterosexual couples do, because we don't, our relationship structures are different just by the sheer nature of the fact that it's not cis man and cis woman, and this is the one thing I always love to tell my cisgendered and heterosexual friends is that instead of thinking of like queerness or gender queerness as a thing that is like wholly different, think about it as in terms of possibility. Think of it in terms of what it means to expand beyond what you think you have to be. So instead of being like, I'm a woman, and like the belief that you kind of ingested over the course of your life was, I'm going to have to be softer. I'm going to have to make sure that men in the room feel like they're just a little bit louder. You realize, you know what? I don't have to be what that definition of a woman is. That can be a different definition.
And, I think
Yeah.
that's fine. But as long as someone like myself, I'm someone who's straight now, as long as they have the ability, or anybody has the ability, whether you're straight or in between, blue, red, whatever, to express themselves without any backlash as
and
well.
I think that's like
Too,
the
and that's
whole
fine.
point
I mean,
of the,
yeah, I live a certain
Yeah.
life. You live a certain life, Christina, and that we all have a connection that we are here on Earth experiencing with this strange journey. I mean, you cut any of us, we bleed blue. I mean, somebody, and obviously, no offense, Mark. I mean, when you walk around, we're such an unlikely connection. We're great friends, but it's more than that. We're connected in the spirit, man, and we're working on something really beautiful, really great and beautiful. And I could have walked by you with prejudgments in my mind. Oh, that must be, maybe he's selling drugs. Oh, why is he there? No, I don't think everybody operates that. I think it's more limited, but I think that like things get propped up on this marketed pedestal with that. Like, I think people are more cool than it's let out to be. I think the enemy kind of does that, but
Yeah, and I think too, like sometimes like cis white male might get the wrong stereotypes put to them as well, because you might say, like, I might look at Jeff and be like, oh, he's not going to understand my story.
They'll look
I'm
at
not
me
going
and
to
judge.
talk and like, I'm just not even going to approach the topic. I'm just going to, just keep on keeping on and assume that maybe he wouldn't want any deeper understanding.
Right. And I think like this is, because again, this is all just like in the nature of like understanding. And like really what I'm bringing up for you is like, this is the position of generally a lot of trans and queer folks,
It
right?
makes sense.
Yeah. So like this is the position of where things are coming from. And again, it goes back down to a question of power structures, like you were saying, because it's one thing for, a cis white male who does just objectively carry a lot of strength and power in our society and our community, for them to be able to kind of exist in this more ebb and flow of identity and of what they choose. Whereas if somebody is trans and they walk out of their house wearing, if it's like, someone who is assigned male at birth and they're wearing makeup and a dress, their chance of being accosted, being raped, being murdered
that's
goes
not
up.
right.
Well, right. And this
Obviously.
and like this is,
I mean, that's
obviously.
Never,
and so
yeah.
like, I genuinely and personally believe, and call me naive or whatever, but I believe in the essential goodness and humans' desire to connect with one another. And where suffering occurs is when something happens to stop that connection, either through an external force or something that's blocking you from within. And so often, what I've discovered in my own life that happens is that I bring that energy forward. And it makes it easier for me to have conversations like this because I have the resilience to do it.
you have a very good vibe.
Oh, thank you. But what happens a lot is that I can't put what my capacities are as a human to communicate with others onto every other person in the world. And I don't expect every person to be able to communicate everything about who they are and what their experience is with complete clarity, right? So how do you find that language to make it more generalized for everyone to talk about?
And I would say, from what because I teach dance, and I was teaching at FDU, and we were doing the original choreography from Jerry Mitchell to Land of Lola from Kinky
Yes.
Boots. And one of my, mass identifying students was really struggling with embodying the idea of being Lola, because I made them all be Lola, right, in class. And he was like, Christina, I'm just like super uncomfortable with this. And I'm like, well, you're an actor. It is something for you to put on and to explore. And he's like, well, I would just never take this role. And I'm like, you don't know that. You don't know that you might be able to bring something to this that maybe other people don't understand. And I'm like, as an actor, you're going to have to play roles that sometimes you don't think you have a connection connection with. And it's that judgment that stops you from doing that.
But I think if it's somebody has a certain belief, like I'm a man of faith, but I also respect and have an understanding of, because that also is the principles that I'm trying to follow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't have that foot in the sand, like, so I'm a pretty open thinker.
And
but I think also on the flip side, Christina, I think it's important to respect that other individual's beliefs if it is something that is faith-based. Because that is
I don't
something
think
that
it
is
was
a real feeling
faith-based.
for them.
I think it was something that no one ever gave him permission to do.
But
right?
if he was uncomfortable with it, why push him into doing that?
But because we're in an academic setting,
Oh,
right, for
okay.
him to grow.
I got you.
And he's a musical theater major,
Fair enough.
right?
You are in
and
a
so,
role of here's your
and
assignment.
I was the role of, and this is the choreography that we were doing. And I said to him, I won't name names, but I was like, listen, after this is over, like, and we had like a little understanding with each other. And I was like, you can go play baseball all you want. And no one's going to think that you're not going to want to play that baseball after this. But when this music is on, you have to pay respect to the character of Lola and Lola's situation.
Thank you for clarifying.
Right. And so in that way, to bring himself out. And then all of a sudden he started finding S curves with his body, and he started really taking ownership of those feminine traits because I gave him permission. I in turn used the analogy of baseball to him, saying like, this doesn't take away any of your straightness.
You're really good at that.
This doesn't take away any of your, heterosexuality. It doesn't change it, right?
Yeah.
Like the song is going to be over and you're going to be okay.
And you'll have a nice little flow dance
But the thing,
to take away with it.
Too, like leading back to what Blaise is saying, how uncomfortable he was to try and assume that feminine role and lose that power over himself. Now imagine anytime you step outside and you worry, right? That you know what I mean? Like even me, like I had this jacket that I got, and a friend of mine, sent it to me, and I ordered it, and it's like really bright, and it's like all sequins, and it's pink. And I was in New York, and I was like, I should not have worn this in New York City. Like this is calling so much attention to myself, and I'm walking alone. And that's something that I think of as someone who's like only 5'3" and an attractive, woman, like, and I've had people come up behind me in New York City and like say really derogatory things to me, and I was just like on my way to the dance studio, and I had on like tights and shorts, and it was a summer day, and like I made a mistake. Like I should have covered up, but should I have covered up? Right. And that man came behind me, and like, I will not repeat on this podcast what he said to me, but in that moment in time, I'm like, if he wanted to do, well,
we'll go beep.
Yeah, exactly.
Right out.
Beep, right? Yeah, but it's not important. I mean, he was just asking me what my sexual experiences were, and I'm just like, this is not
appropriate conversation.
Yeah, and I think this goes with
right.
Blaise too. What you were saying was like the first question you get as a gay couple is, "Oh, who's the top and who's the bottom?" I would never ask you or your wife like, "What's your favorite sexual position?" Like what? Like I think that's kind of the point. It's just like. If you wouldn't say it to a straight couple, why is it okay to say to a gay couple?
I think people are so immature with it.
Yeah.
Because it's coming to light and they're learning. That's why it's important for us to be doing what we're doing now. I do also think that language sort of rolls over from past. And what I mean by that is like something that may offend you may have meant something else prior, but it's embedded or ingrained on the way somebody grew up from the past. So it's not really an offense per se. But it's just but I think the best way to do it is educate. Educate people. It's proven. In the workforce, as I build WAVE and NCK equipment, positivity in the workforce is proven. People are affected by it more. And especially with all the negativity, if you go that route, take principles from like Gordon or thing like that, and you utilize it to empower people for whatever anything like that, or just anything in general, I think it's just a much better approach than going, you got to say it like this. You got to do it like this. It's like being a little kid. I'm not a parent, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see. However,
everybody says things that intend. I think what you're kind of getting at, Jeff, if I could get in your head for a second,
Pick
is
the brain.
that like you never have the intention of hurting someone.
No.
And I think that hurts you, thinking that someone would assume that your words were being used to hurt them when that was never the intention. It's just like you didn't know.
I wonder how often
you know?
that happens too, Christina.
In like, you know, in something we talk about a lot in the therapy room is that there's this big conversation right now about intention versus impact and how powerful that is in repertory work, like, you know, in the work that says, and it's very actually powerful with married couples. Actually, it's very powerful in relationship therapy, where if somebody's coming home and like the language you use, let's say we have a very traditional family where it's a stay-at-home mom and it's a man who's working 9 to 5 or something else, and she was taking care of the kids all day, and he comes home and she's like, "Hi, honey, I'm in the living room. I love you," and he goes, "Sure, sure." Not because he doesn't love her, but because something was on his mind at that moment when he walks into the other room. And like, which is something that I think happens with every couple a lot. It's just like, you're in work mode, you just going. And for you that you're like, I'll take care of it later. It doesn't matter as much to you. But the other person in the room who maybe throughout that entire day was done with it all. Maybe if they have kids, maybe they just their kids were in detention because they were acting out again. Maybe the neighbor came over and was screaming about something. Who knows, right? And the impact to them was like, how can you not know that I am hurting so badly? How can you just walk in here with your day and your energy, and I've been here all day, and you can just walk in there and say, sure, sure. And then it becomes this whole thing where it's like, oh, that wasn't my intention. I just wasn't thinking. But it's like, but that was the impact. And how do you navigate that conversation? And the powerful part is that intention does matter. Like what a person's intention when they're coming forward, that is an important thing. But what's equally important is understanding that how someone else takes that information in may not be the way you want them to or even expect them to, but it will still happen. And you can't just say that it shouldn't happen, because there's a lot of things that shouldn't be happening in the world, but we have nearly 8 billion different voices and 8 billion different realities,
everybody has
right?
ADD too, and everything's so distracted. I'm sure they're overlooking, because a lot of times we're not really paying attention to those feeling signals in people, or looking at their facial expressions and things like that. And I wonder with the new generation, they're much more electronics and secluded, and that type of connection and face-to-face interaction, how that important that is, that sort of lacks too.
Yeah.
I think all that does tie in. It's not as cookie cutter. It's very complicated.
Exactly. And I think that's something that I love about the queer community, is that the focus, if I may say so, go out on a branch from what I know of it, is that the focus is purely human to human connection. That, I've never been involved in a queer community where I felt like an outsider. Like, even as a cis woman, I never felt like, hey, like, I can't go to Blaise, and like we connected like right away,
Now, do you think if I came and knowing me, I mean, we haven't known each other long. What do you think, how I would be received?
I just think this is where intention matters. Like, if you're anybody can walk into a queer space, and if you're going to that queer space to have a good time or just to be surrounded by people you love, it's not going to matter. It's like, I think there's going to be acceptance and love, and they're going to want you there. Now, if it were like, let's say, a pride event for folks, or an activist event for folks who are like fighting something politically, and they're like, the queer space is meant to be a queer space, and you entered into that space as an interviewer or as somebody who's going to kind of be a speed bump on purpose, that's different. But if you're just entering into a space as a human and there's other queer people there, I don't think I've never known that to be a problem, honestly, until someone wants it to be a problem.
I mean, I think the analogy, we could use is like, in my dance studio, the only person that I can't teach is the dancer that doesn't want to dance.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the only requirement for coming into the studio, is you have to want to know how to dance. And the thing is, if you want to be a community member, you can enter into that community, But if you are purposely coming to just be like, ugh, right? and people do it all the time, like for different reasons, And that's something that I keep in my classroom too, like versus intention versus impact. Like one of my biggest rules, you guys know, it's in my acting classroom too, is no whispering, right? Because it doesn't matter what you're whispering about. It's excluding people, right? And if you have something to say and you need to say it right then and it's an emergency, why can't you say it in front of the group?
Yeah, I
you
think it's
know,
important to-
like that's my biggest thing. You could be talking about the weather, but if someone is being vulnerable and then someone's like, automatically you've excluded them. And if we're having an environment of inclusion, like that is something that drives me wild, and I'm just like, nah. Like,
I think it's important to try to use empathy and put ourselves in the other person's shoes.
Capital
And
E,
for time
absolutely.
purposes.
Yeah.
If you can, as quick as you can, I know, or maybe you can come back. But we had talked about the actual sex that you're born with.
Oh yeah,
Queer.
we just diverged
Yes,
from that.
yes. You
Just
just,
go
like, kept
structurally.
talking.
Yeah, I know, it was great.
We
It's
didn't
been
even
great.
get to the theater element yet.
Yeah, this
but,
has been fantastic so far. Thank you so much. But like, just so people have an understanding, so there's that, the actual sex that you're born with, queer, or how you identify, or
There's sex you're born with. There's people who you're sexually attracted to, which whole other column. Then there's how you were born, how you feel inside. That's what we call gender identity. How you express, that's your gender expression. So let's say you feel like a woman on the inside, but you're butch. And so you wear a lot of traditionally masculine clothes, like suits or like sneaks or something like that. And then there's gender identity and gender expression. Those are the two big ones, and the sex you were born as. And that's like the big three. I call it like the gender trifecta. And like within gender theory, there's a lot other extra stuff, but just for simplicity's sake, those are the big three.
and that's just perfect for anybody out there that just didn't have a high level understanding at all. Because it's amazing. It's amazing when you think about it, like how, right, Mark? Like we tend to, prejudge, or we tend to take on these things without full understanding really what they are. We not hate things, but we may not like things, or we may assume certain things about certain people or places and things. There's a lot of places that people will be like, oh, go there, but they're beautiful, just like anywhere else. There's bad areas and there's good areas. It's like, it's common.
Yeah.
What
I
do you
mean,
think?
it is going back to what Blaise was saying about, what you're born with, the identity is the trifecta.
Yeah.
What you're born with, what you identify with, how you project,
Yeah.
onto others. And, it's like, watch how you say and watch what you say and how you deliver to someone that you want them to identify. You know what I'm saying? It's all about presentation.
Yeah. Presentation. Okay.
Presentation being like cognizant of it, that you're in control. And there's the other trifecta that I work on in my therapy, which is thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Right?
CBT. Yes.
Feeling and behaviors.
No, I know we only have a little bit more time left.
No,
but
that's okay.
I
It's
just
fine
wanted
if we roll over.
I just wanted to add one small thing to it, because I definitely believe education being a silver bullet, but I also love what you said before. There's this idea that you can just tell people what to do all the time, and it's not necessarily going to sink in. It's like, radical empathy, radical kindness, radical compassion, like basically my pillars of my life. But another part of it is also exposure. A big reason why you're finding so many things being uncomfortable right now is just that people aren't as exposed to different walks of life anymore. There's a lot of, as connected as we are as a society with TikTok, with Facebook, with Instagram, I think that people are often more lonely than ever. This
I agree
idea,
with that.
this idea of like,
doom scroll.
idea of human connection. And this is the reason why I think theater is so powerful, is that yes, you can come as you are, but your entire task on a stage is to tell a story about someone who is not you.
Yeah.
And it teaches that radical kind of empathy. And so if folks want to just start saying, I want to better understand this, because I also believe that living in judgment and hate is so much harder than living in light and love.
100%.
And so, like, if you're like, I just want to know more about this, then expose yourself to things that you weren't necessarily used to. Watch a movie you're not necessarily used to. Sit, like as we say in therapy, lean into the discomfort a little bit, because on the other side of that discomfort is understanding. And then your worldview and your just experience of life explodes.
You blew it away. I mean, I
Blaise
nothing.
is great.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a good way to end it. Is there any websites, any upcoming shows, anything you guys want to share to the audience?
Yes.
Or to, yeah.
Oh yes.
Jesus Christ Superstar.
I'll let you do Jesus Christ Superstar, because
you're gonna
I
let me
need
do Jesus
yes,
Christ
because
Superstar.
I just want to plug
yes,
the one
yes.
I'm on board with. So yes, I am the intimacy and inclusion director of a place called Broadway Boddies in New York City.
Okay.
We are the first fat positive theater company in New York City.
Congrats.
Thank you. Our nice little tagline is larger bodies and leading roles. But really what we also specialize in is marginalized bodies existing in leading roles. So like people who, we have people of varying sizes, we always have. Everyone has the right to be beautiful. Everyone has the right to be seen, and everyone has the right to be sexy. That is kind of how I say it. And nobody has the right to tell you that you're not. So like, I just wanted to give that a quick plug, and I'll give it over to Christina to tell us about JCS.
Yes. And then Blaise and I are in a production of Jesus Christ Superstar. Blaise actually plays Judas, one of the starring roles. I am ensemble. You'll see me many times throughout. I mean, I'm a star in my own right, but not in the same way that
I'm not going to
Blaise is.
disagree. Wait to see her dance.
Where
It's
is it?
amazing.
It's at the Cranford Dramatic Club in Cranford, New Jersey.
When's the next show?
The show opens on Friday,
Okay, great.
Yep.
which is October 11th.
October 11th,
Yes,
yeah.
October
Yep.
11th. So we have a Friday and Saturday performance, and then we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday of consecutive weekends in October. So if you go to the Cranford Dramatic Club's website, you can go ahead and buy tickets. And I think Friday night is like really close to being sold out. So
Yeah, I think our opening weekend is close to being sold out. So,
yeah. So definitely grab your tickets.
Yeah, and everybody go get some acting classes.
Yes, as
Yes.
well. That's
Christina,
starting
for sure.
again
She's
October
great.
15th.
I'll vouch.
So.
Mark, what do you think? You'll vouch for Christina? Absolutely.
Always.
Yeah.
You know, everybody, I think this was a really unique, great conversation, and it seems like we have something here. And at Ride the Wave, the path is to the person. And we want to thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we were able to help provide a little bit more understanding. You guys take care and have a great one. Thank you so much.
Thank
For coming.
you. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank
having
you
us.
for
Absolutely,
having
it was
me.
a lot of fun.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Ride the Wave. It's been a pleasure having you with us as we explore ways to make a positive impact together. Remember, every little wave creates a ripple of change. We appreciate any support you can provide as we plan to build an all-inclusive, modern campus and empower communities. For details on how you can contribute through various platforms, please visit us at ridethewave.org. Until next time, keep riding the wave of change with us. I'm Jeff Fisher, signing off, but the journey continues.